Welcome back to a top-level game of StarCraft 2. Today it's time for a professional match of Terran versus Zerg, where we find ourselves on the map Berlingrad. Spawning here in the top left-hand corner and playing with the red Zerg drones, we have the current world champion of StarCraft 2, and his name is Serral. His opponent in the opposite corner with the hot pink SCVs, one of the very best Terrans from South Korea. We're looking at Kjur's main command center. Alrighty, so Serral versus Kjur on Berlingrad. Now, for those of you that are very in sync with all of the ongoing StarCraft 2 tournaments, you'll probably recognize that these two have not played against each other over the last few weeks. As a matter of fact, this particular game, as of me making this video right now, it was played about 2.5 months or so ago. And I was going through all of my replays, because currently there's a bit of a replay drought. So generally I try to cast, well, games that are a little bit more recent than this, but sadly, I've already covered all of the best games that have been played over the last couple of weeks. We're waiting for the new DreamHack tournament, or the most recent DreamHack tournament, to release their replay pack. And by the time you're watching this, those games are probably available to cast already. But since I'm heading on over to actually cast a StarCraft 2 tournament in Germany next week, I'm currently in the process of prepping some videos in advance, so you guys have something to watch while I'm away from home as well. And I figured, let me dive into my older StarCraft 2 replay folders and see if there's any games that I haven't casted. Interestingly enough, even though there's not a whole lot of recent games, actually there's no recent games of these two available at all, apparently I didn't even cast Serral versus Kjur 2 months ago, which is pretty funny because we go through these phases where there's tons of games to cast and then there's no games to cast, and apparently 2 months ago, Serral versus Kjur just didn't make the cut, which is kind of hilarious because these two, they're some of my very favorite players in the game. Anyhow, I don't think it really matters, by the way. I mean, especially in a meta like Terran versus Zerg, it hasn't really changed over the last couple of years all too much. I mean, obviously the late game has changed, but that's happened like a half year or so ago. We see a lot of mass command center styles, especially on Berlingrad right now, so wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be something that Kjur will bring to this party too. But I think in general, as long as the games are in the same patch and ideally on the same map pool as well, I don't think it really matters all too much if the games are a little bit older. Although, if you disagree with me, let me know down below in the comment section of this video. Actually, I'd like to hear your thoughts. How old should a game be until it becomes uncastable, right? How old should a replay be before I should not cover it anymore on the YouTube channel? I mean, if I didn't mention it, you probably wouldn't have noticed that, you know, this game was a couple months old. Anyhow. Here's the thing. Serral, he's very good at this game, okay? Especially in Terran versus Zerg. He doesn't, I guess from his perspective, Zerg versus Terran, he doesn't really lose all too often. He's got something north of 90% win rate over the course of the last couple of years in this matchup, which is absolutely absurd. Now, obviously, when it comes to, those tournament games, he also goes up against Terrans that he definitely shouldn't be losing against. So maybe against the best Terran players in the world, and Kjur definitely ranks amongst them as well. His win rate is going to be a little bit closer to 70% or something, but overall, his win rate in Terran versus Zerg is phenomenal. Wouldn't be surprised if because of that, Mr. Kjur also feels a little bit threatened, because there's not really any conceivable weakness that Serral really has in this matchup, so he decided to bring out a bit of an older build. This is the 2-1-1, where you go for 2 barracks, 1 factory, and then 1 starport. Most commonly in StarCraft 2, we see the 1-1-1, so 1 barracks, 1 factory, 1 starport, but Kjur, he's gonna go for a very quick Stimpack research. This is one of those builds that's been around for a decade, and it sort of fades in and out of popularity, so it never really leaves the meta entirely. It's always played, but yeah, it's never really the most popular strategy to go for. Kjur, I don't think he really assumes that his opponent is going to roll over and die with a 2-1-1 like this, but he definitely is planning on playing this game a little bit more aggressively than what we normally see with Hellions and Banshees on that. So usually what you do is you get 2 barracks going, one of them has a reactor, one of them has a tech lab. You go for the Stimpack research, then you make a reactor on the factory as well. When the starport finishes up, you switch it over, you go for 2 medevacs, and then you fly them across the map. So you can hit your opponent in the face at 5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes 10 seconds, 5 minutes and 20 seconds, depending on the size of the map, with 16 Marines and then also Stimpack, which is for obvious reasons very, very powerful. The only problem is that since this build has been around for such a long time, Serral doesn't even really need the heads up really that early. He'll probably play a safe build, which is what he normally does, so that Baneling Nest is very conservatively timed. If he's going to go for a lair here as well, I think we should see one here any second now. You should be able to get the Baneling speed going relatively early too, and that will keep him alive against, there we go, against practically everything in the early game. Some Zerg players like to cut a corner and they'll go for 1-1 upgrades first before going for the lair and the Baneling Nest, but this is what Serral does most of the time. He has those Zerglings patrolling out in front of the Terran bases too, so now he knows exactly what he's going up against. Careful. All right, those queens were already on the hunt. Nice movement right there by Cure. He's going to keep this alive. And he's actually, okay, he's not following this up with another command center. He's added on another reactor as well as another barracks here instead. So this is Cure saying, okay, I'm gonna go for aggression here. I know the 15 Marine drop and 1 Reaper drop is likely not gonna win me the game. I mean, it really shouldn't at this level. But maybe I can catch my opponent off guard with even more stuff. So he's now following this up with a 3-1-1, which is kind of interesting. It does put him in a bit of a tricky economical position. Because his army just simply... Yeah, his economy won't be as big. Question is Serral going to be caught off guard against this? He's going for the Baneling speed right now. It's still going to be, well, a while until that one is out. Okay. 2 siege tanks inside of a medevac here and more Marines moving across the map. Serral at this point... probably has recognized that something is a little bit off. Okay, now he sees the additional Marines, and I think this tells him everything that he needs to know. He was already getting a little bit concerned, though, because he was already adding on more and more Lings. The problem is, can he actually engage this sort of army without Baneling speed? Well, so far, the creep spread is really good. Yeah, this is going to slow Cure down. So the creep spread actually is one of those things, one of the unsung heroes of well, Zerg, where if the creep wouldn't have been up here, I think Cure would have actually sieged up a little bit more aggressively. Right now, he's got to wait until that creep disappears. And this is buying a very valued time for Serral to finish up that Baneling speed upgrade. And I think he's going to wait. I think he should wait. Yeah. So the queens have been saving up energy for a long while. 2 queens ended up going down there. Yeah, so 2 queens here in total. Yeah, Cure's like, come on, bro! Come and fight into the siege tank range. Come on, mate. Come on, let's go. Serral's not giving him the satisfaction. Instead, he's setting up a huge surround right now. Baneling speed, centrifugal hooks at this point is done. He's going to try and collapse on top of this entire Terran army. Beautiful cleanup right here by the finisher, showing us that he was not born yesterday. He knows exactly what needs to be done in these sorts of circumstances. And that was honestly a very, very clean start right there for him. Only just now is when the 3rd command center is, well, about halfway done. This is pretty late. Most of the time we see this one coming up quite a bit sooner than this, so Cure definitely had the intention of winning the game by now. Well, sadly for him, so far that hasn't happened yet. On the flip side, though, it's not like Serral. He's gonna go for another wave. This is the 3rd attack wave. The triple tap right here from Cure, apparently. 3 attack waves by the 8-minute mark. And this is once again a pretty big army, although Zerg's force is still huge. I hope that Cure is not misreading this because there's a lot more Lings out on the map. Wouldn't be surprised, yeah, if he's just going to make the exact same move. I mean, the siege tanks are in the same spot. He probably wanted to knock down the debris right over there, but instead he's going to collapse on that army a second time. And I think that there should be more than enough, yeah. All right. Now, what I was going to say is that on the flip side, for Cure, at the very least, there really hasn't been that much drone production on the side of the Zerg. So, still 30 more Lings. Serral very much so respecting this. He hasn't seen a 3rd command center, so yeah, he's keeping track right there of all of the locations where a 3rd CC could be. This Overseer actually not going into the main base just yet, but apparently he's a little bit concerned about just another 2-base all-in here from Cure. I guess that would make it a complete all-in. At this point, it was mostly like an all-in-y. Okay, it was a little bit all-in-y, but not super aggressive. Yeah, so Serral actually not adding on a whole lot of drones here for that 4th base of his. Instead, just sitting around on 57 workers for a while. So over the last few minutes, we've seen a non-stop Zergling production here. Oh, a couple of queens. Nice pickup right here for Cure. Oh, well. Cure apparently is going to go up against Burrow right now, so at the very least one of them will stay alive. But yeah, since Zerg has been making non-stop army here for quite a while right now, that early game has to be super clean. Imagine that, well, over the last few minutes, Serral would have not been at 57 drones, but at like 50. It's not a huge difference, but his army would have been quite a bit smaller than it actually ended up being, and there's a good chance that Cure would have been able to win. Alright. I believe, though, that this is the moment where Serral gets that map control. Creep strat, by the way, is looking dangerous. You know, you can't afford making mistakes like that, Cure. Cure is still looking very good as far as the supply count goes. But you can see that he's now pushed back quite far. Second factory coming up here, right at the front. There's obviously this high ground over here as well, right, for the Terran on this map, which is fantastic. Love the sensor tower. Very good. Bio army here on the left side of the map also deflected. But the creep spread is starting to, yeah, really rock the world here of Serral. This is... this is becoming already like, what, 50% coverage? And at this point, I'm not entirely sure what the Terran's going to be able to do against that. Even the Queens have stepped all the way towards the front. Yeah, Queens are very good. Definitely the best Zerg unit. Even though they've received so many nerfs over the years, they are so strong. To be fair, though, I'm not entirely sure what you could do to adjust them to not make them... Like, you don't really have much of another choice in the early game either, right? It's not like you have any other reliable anti-air, for example. Anyhow, that's a discussion for another time. Serral at this point in the driver's seat of this particular match. He's going into a hive. He's going into +2/+2 research. And he's up to 80 drones. 80 drones, honestly pretty conservative. But he's just making sure that he's not making any slip-ups, right? And this is honestly the way that he plays. Like, you'll see like guys like Raynor going up to like 90 to even 100 of those workers. They're a bit more of a madman. Serral kind of plays this game like it's like an Excel spreadsheet, you know? Like whatever is the statistical most likely choice for him to win, that's what he's going for. And whenever he's in the zone, it's honestly a beautiful thing to watch. All of the things so far here are going very well for him. Adrenal glands is coming up, Vipers are coming up, Ultralisk Cavern is producing, he's got Zerglings and Banelings burrowed all over the map, so not only can he keep track of exactly where this Terran player is currently located, he also knows when a 4th command center is trying to land, and 80 drones is apparently what he's happy with here. It does mean that he won't have that big of a bank. Yeah, Cure doing a great job here, keeping the units alive, and as this game progresses, I think I'm gonna like the spot for Cure more and more. Since Serral is only at so few drones, he doesn't really build that big of a bank. Berlingrad is also a pretty defensive map, so this 4th command center, I'm not entirely sure what Zerg could do against it, other than like run a bunch of Zerglings and Banelings into it. But you can see here Cure slowly but surely creating a line of siege tanks. Love the positioning here of those supply depots and those structures in general. He can see exactly when the Zerg player wants to move in and put the units in the right place. These siege tanks here on the high ground in particular, they have a lot of surface area to cover. And they should get a couple of additional shots in if the Zerg does decide to be aggressive. Changelings? That changeling over there got the knight, but this one apparently, that one is pretending to be a Marine. Ghost Academy coming up too. You really do need that 4-base economy in order to properly produce those ghosts. But eventually, Cure is going to get there, and this is when he's also going to start building up the command centers. So after a very aggressive early game, Cure has decided to take an exact opposite approach right now. And he's going to try and play the macro match here instead. This is what we commonly see in the current meta. Maru popularized this some time ago, but if it's up to Serral, he's going to try and prevent this from happening entirely. Massive blinding clouds, by the way. Not just shutting down the siege tanks, but also the biological units. But honestly, that was brilliant there for Cure. Great backup. This is why you don't move all of your siege tanks to the front. That run right there from those Marines was excellent. And in the end, that was a very expensive set of Zerg units right there to lose. Look at that. That cost efficiency here from Terran has been phenomenal. So despite the fact that Serral's economy is quite a bit better than that of the Terran, his eco isn't that insanely good. And Cure is trading much more efficiently. The only problem, though, is that, yeah, you can add on a lot of additional command centers here as Terran, but where exactly do you plant them down? This base kind of feels like it's pretty far out there. The same can be said for the base down south. This is usually the logical next step here for Terran. They'll usually try and go for the 6 o'clock base instead. But obviously if you go and, yeah, spread yourself that thinly across like 5 bases, with the 5th being so far away, you're gonna leave gaps in your defense. And oftentimes that means that the planetary over here is vulnerable or the 3rd base over here is vulnerable. Cure will need to tread very lightly. In the meantime, by the way, Serral's recognizing the pacing at which the Terran is playing at. So he's like, you know what? If you're gonna take such a long time taking additional bases. If you don't want to really fight me, I'll just take one of the expansions that's normally considered to be yours, and I'll just send more units at you. Let's see how the defense is going to be right over here on the left side of the Terran bases. Well, once again, I think the majority of the units will be able to stay alive, but this is now starting to hurt quite a bit. Yep, a load of SCVs end up going down. Then again, SCVs at this point not as important. When you have, of course, oh my god. The income advantage for the last 10 minutes. I was gonna say, when you have that many orbital commands, you can replace the SCVs with mules quite well. Curious to see when the first mules start returning their cargo. Yeah, so it is gonna be a little bit better here for Cure, but this is what happens, man. Serral does this time and time again, where his early game is incredibly clean. He doesn't really take a whole lot of damage, even though he was slowed down as far as like his economy goes. He didn't really take a whole lot of damage, and he gets to now play his own game. And his own game is very scary. A lot of it can be traced back though to just like the first 5 minutes. If you're trying to get better in StarCraft 2, I highly recommend you really focus as hard as you can on the first 5 minutes of the game. This is like as much a message to anyone out there that's trying to get better as far as it is a message for myself as well. I tend to autopilot in the first few minutes, but if you like open up a professional's replay and you compare the amount that they have at like the 5-minute mark towards what you normally have at the 5-minute mark, it's staggering what's actually possible. Anyhow, here we go again. Serral's like rinse and repeat. Gonna try once more. None of these traits are gonna be particularly cost efficient here for the Zerg player, but the Zerg has a lot more eco. Not a whole lot, though. I mean, I say that. Serral is not maxed out with this reinforcement of 82 Zerglings, and he doesn't have a bank. Not much of a bank, anyways. Creep spread, covering a good 70% of the map. I think Cure's next step is probably to go for the base down south, but it's going to be quite difficult for him to acquire that. The problem is, the Natural Expo, as well as the main base, they're pretty much dry. Third command center, even though this one was landed super late, is also gonna run out of resources. So Cure needs to be cautious. Serral knows it. Serral's even now going into the neural parasite, so if he ever has a lot of gas, he will probably add on some infestors. Corruptors added into the mix, kind of interesting. Probably not for Brute Lords, instead just to try and snipe a couple of those medevacs. Alright, there is a Greater Spire coming up, so if he ever wants to make Brutes, that is going to be an option too. Upon seeing those Corruptors, okay, he briefly considered going for some Thors, but Cure probably recognizes that for the time being, Brutes aren't really going to be an issue, and instead he decides to queue up a couple more Siege tanks. But yeah, a very beautiful swarmy game right here from Serral so far. It's actually been a little while since I've casted a Serral game. I've casted a lot of other Zergs lately. The best word I can come up with to describe the playstyle is just surgical. Like, it's incredibly precise. There's very little wasted action. Turns out if you have 510 actions on average a minute, if you waste as little of it as possible, you end up being in a pretty good spot. Look at the minimap. Alright, here we go again. Banelings rolling forward. Planetary, even though that was meant for the defense, just gets blown up in a heartbeat. Serral has so much money right now that he can do whatever he likes. He's added on to 95 drones, by the way. 112 Zerglings for the reinforcement. 554 have already gone down. It's just going to be Zerglings and Banelings. This is going to be a very critical base. Can we kill that Zergling? Come on. Okay, he's going to need to scan again. Yeah. This is going to be a very critical base. Serral, moving the Infestor forward. The reason why the Infestor is here, by the way, he needs to be very careful because there's a missile turret. That's a detector. Well, there's going to be another missile turret right next to the Infestor if he's not careful too. The Infestor is here to neuroparasite the Ghost and then to shoot EMP with the Ghost on the other Ghosts. Once the Ghosts have no more energy, this Terran army is as good as dead. So there we go! Oh my god, Serral! Alright, here comes the Swarm. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I've noticed in the comment section of the Serral games that there's a lot more discussion about balance. I could almost guarantee you that there's someone complaining there about the queens or the zerglings or the banelings or the creep spread or whatever. There's pretty much always some complaining going on. Anyways, just an observation. Serral looking absolutely dominant in this match. Ever since the early game, Cure really didn't have much to say, and because of that, the finisher obtains another win.